Hey, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to the Wrench Factor podcast, the show that gives you the inside look at what really drives modern manufacturing and maintenance. I'm your guest host today, Tyler Hufstetler. I'm the Director of Partnerships for MaintainX. And today we have a really special guest, Blaine Bryant, who's the CIO and SVP at Lightera. Before we get started, I'm really excited about this conversation because as companies are completing and finalizing their 2026 planning cycle, this conversation, this topic today is something that, in my opinion, is a great opportunity for operations teams to hear, to think about as they evaluate their solutions and their needs for 2026 and where and how they're going to take their team next year. Our guest today, Blaine, and I met back in September at a dinner in San Francisco area, both being from Texas. We covered a lot of ground in the conversation, and he's been gracious enough with his busy schedule, traveling all over the world, to keep the conversation going with me over the last several months. And as I have ideas or conversation points, Blaine's been always open to engaging with me. So without further ado, here's Blaine. And every guest, Blaine, starts off with a quick background and intro. And so I'm gonna. Your intro is very long. You have quite the resume. So I'm gonna do my best here to give you justice for it. So Blaine Bryant is the global CIO and IT executive known for leading large-scale digital transformations across multinational enterprises. With more than 2 decades of experience spanning manufacturing, software, financial services, and high-tech industries, he has built a reputation for turning technology organizations into strategic value creators. Blaine currently serves as the Chief Information Officer and Senior Vice President at Lightera, a global manufacturer of fiber optic and cable products, where he's driving global IT consolidation, MES standardization, data modernization, and cybersecurity maturity across 27 locations. That's a big job. Previously, he held CIO and security leadership roles at Acela and directed enterprise transformation programs at BMC Software, where he improved delivery performance, strengthened cybersecurity, and generated tens of millions in cost savings. Blaine, welcome. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tyler. It's a pleasure to be with you and the MaintainX audience here. Thanks for having me on the Wrench Factor. It's a pleasure to be with you all.
I'm really excited. Blaine, over the last several months, as we came out of that dinner in San Francisco, and I had some of these thoughts, and it just really triggered some of the same conversations that we keep hearing day in and day out from operations teams as they engage with the CIO's office. And it just really seems that what they're challenged with is how do they help articulate value to their organization. We live in a world where, like we were talking previously, that there's notifications all the time. There's new software always hitting the market. There's new features constantly coming out. And operations has a mandate. Operations mandate is we have to improve throughput and yield. And the CIO's office has a mandate too. And so instead of being like two ships passing in the night, how do they work together and how do they help drive that? And based on your experience and based on what you're solving today at Lightera, I thought, man, this would be so great to have this conversation. So I guess, Blaine, from a CIO's perspective, maybe something that you can help shape for us here. From a CIO's perspective, why is there often this tension between IT, back office operations, and then the frontline operations teams when it comes to adopting new tools?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think it stems from how these organizations are born, bred, and incented over time. OT, tends to be very aligned with, again, just manufacturing operations, process engineering, and they're focused on specific challenges that are often very localized and specific to the operations and whatever it is they're doing and where they're doing it. IT certainly has those requirements, but they also have requirements from a global perspective to bring modernization, standardization, and efficiency for the enterprise. And so those worlds don't always, I think, meet with the greatest collaboration and consistency. Again, they're just kind of incented a little bit differently. But I think what's important is for companies and leaders in both areas and executive leadership teams to recognize one thing, right? There are two types of businesses in the world: those that are technology companies, and those that haven't recognized that they're technology companies yet.
Yeah.
Right. And so when we think about digital manufacturing, right, and leveraging technology as a competitive advantage, I think we all want the same thing. We want, to drive the highest quality product at the greatest efficiency, with the best on-time delivery and the best operating income, metrics we can achieve. And so I think there's a within digital manufacturing, there's a huge opportunity for partnership and convergence. We talk all the time about IT OT convergence, and so what does that mean, right? Those technologies aren't, and those environments aren't just going to converge by themselves. I think we often are, IT organizations and particularly OT, organizations are steeped with engineers that want to solve problems. But I think the enlightened organization will bring to bear some architects that take a look at, right, we might solve a problem in a particular location. So that's an answer, but is it the answer from an enterprise perspective, and does it scale? Or, can we take this to other locations? Can we standardize to a greater extent? Can we engage in volume discount negotiations, pricing negotiations with key strategic suppliers? In order to have those sorts of conversations, I think everything really starts first with relationships. You have to have strong relationships and a coincidence of needs between IT and OT leadership, and we should be aligned to a common vision so that we can understand what's important to each area, and look for ways to arrive, together at a common vision and a common goal, and really have the conversation about why we should want to help the other. And it's not just about us, where IT can't achieve the outcomes that the enterprise expects by itself. OT can't do it by itself. We have to recognize it's a team sport. We have to get there together, and we have to understand first and foremost that we need to be helping each other, right? And then, again, being aligned to common vision, goals, outcomes, then you're in a better position to select technology. But often what you find is, people are running around with technical solutions looking for a business problem instead of the other way around.
That's right. It absolutely is a team sport. It's I think of, when on this, the left hand absolutely has to know what the right hand is doing. You have to know what the end state is going for the business. Like, where are you trying to go overall? Sometimes from an operations lens, they think about the immediate fire, what is directly in front of them. And the IT org is sometimes thinking 3, 4, 5 years down the line. And so being able to articulate the immediate need and how that immediate need fits into the overall strategy for where the organization is going is incredibly challenging for some teams. But you've done that here within your own company, your own team. So one of the things that you mentioned previously to me was you've helped create a position and role that's effectively the CIO or the CTO for operations that works directly with y'all. Maybe you could unpack that part too.
Sure. That's it's a great point of discussion. So, Lightera was formed through combining 3 different entities under a parent company, right, into one global brand. And so we have different regions that really were different companies, and even within a particular region, the different locations that made up that region, each kind of acted like their own company in many respects. And so there was a lot of this decentralization and non-standardization, and yet as a global enterprise, you have this challenge around. We often talk about IT/OT convergence, and that's more of a data story, but there's also a need for IT/OT separation from a security perspective, and then there's also a lot of concern about obsolescence risk, both from an IT perspective and OT perspective, right? And they're different yet similar. And so in IT, we've been very focused on managing our end of life risk and doing all the good work in asset management processes and identifying what are the systems that need to be upgraded and replaced, modernized. And then of course, that lends benefits to your cybersecurity posture. So that, when you're reducing your EOL challenge, you're improving your ability to patch and manage vulnerabilities and all of that good stuff. So we're going through those motions, and then also looking at, wait a minute, right? This is so much more than IT, right? We have a lot of this same challenge in OT, and we can see it. And oftentimes IT teams in certain locations get pulled into addressing some of these challenges because there's maybe not enough OT coverage in a particular location. And so we said, look, we have a real opportunity here to pull together some folks in a steering committee. And it's, again, you have to be careful because you're asking some folks who already have full-time jobs to take on something more. And yet the reason why you need to be proactive from an enterprise perspective is quite obvious, right? You have really expensive equipment running critical processes that generate products and revenue and profit in your factories, right? So all your critical OT equipment, and a lot of that is kind of managed for maintenance and obsolescence risk at a local level. And you might have somebody doing preventative maintenance has got their top 10 lists of, okay, if I get my next $500,000 in CapEx, to go do improvements, here's where I'm going to invest that, and here are the upgrades I'm going to make. But a lot of that, again, is managed locally, and it's often on the plant manager to manage their budget. And let's face it, right? Times aren't always great, right? Times are tough, and you have budget pressures, and sometimes you end up deferring some of that risk and kind of kicking a can down the road.
Yep.
And if you do that long enough, you compound your risk at a particular location, but it's only really managed at that location. So the people that are accountable for managing risk at the enterprise may not have the best view on the total depth of their technical debt, not just from an IT perspective, but also from an OT perspective. So we said this cannot be ignored, right? And we need to bring together a team of people to act as a steering committee to go and assess that obsolescence risk and the IT/OT risk all in the same pass. Because let's face it, you don't want to go through each location and do physical inventories and collect data, very often. You want to do it, every so often, but as few times as possible. But the point is that you want to establish a common template, a common way of collecting data that's going to help support your decision-making process about how you're going to identify, prioritize, and manage that obsolescence risk from an enterprise perspective. So the idea is that you go through and you collect that information at each location. You kind of identify what's the top 10 list at each location. What are we able to address with the funding levels that we have in the current fiscal year or next? But also, you need to kind of roll that up into an enterprise view that says, what's the enterprise top 10?
Yeah.
Right. What are the biggest operational risks to this company and that could potentially threaten, achievement of financial targets. And we do the same, of course, in IT. IT and cybersecurity risk management. That's very common practice, and it's typically done at the enterprise level. But OT, that's not always the case. In very mature organizations, absolutely, right? But in others, maybe not so much. And so it really comes down to, first, as I mentioned in the previous answer, it's establishing those relationships and understanding, with IT and OT folks at the table, why it's really crucially important, to establish a new way of working that, really guards the hygiene, right? The operational hygiene of the company.
Blaine, I think about where we are today in the year and coming up on year end. And some of the things that you're saying really comes back to the leadership aspect of it, which is they're building really that cross-functional team that is able to advocate for their own business needs. And the CIO's team is looking at the framework and saying, here are the solutions to help future-proof for your technology that won't become obsolete so quickly. So how do we help de-risk this? Mm-hmm. The way the operations hears that is they're thinking, okay, we're going to buy a solution that's not going to become obsolete in the next feature update or the next AI cycle or whatever other, hype cycle there might be. But they're really looking for things that are going to be with them and be that force multiplier tool. And from the operations standpoint, they really need to leverage the CIO's office to be identifying, where and how they deploy that technology, not just from a security side, but how that fits into the overall tech stack. So that way, as an organization, right, operations for one location is one slice of the pie, but there's 27 locations. You can't have 27 different solutions. You need to have something that can scale across it. So giving that flexibility to the operations teams, but also making sure that what is being done at one location can be scaled across. And really that scalability side, if that solution cannot be scaled across locations, if it can't be scaled across other business units, then really you're compressing your ROI. Like you don't have a significant value there. I guess as we think about 2026 and we think about the planning cycles here, what are some things that I guess you could leave the audience here today with, which would be, this is what really worked for us in 25. If I could share one thing or two things out to do this, what would you do? What would you advise folks for 2026?
Yeah, I would say that, again, it kind of comes down to, it depends where you are, right? Some organizations are hyper mature in kind of how they manage IT, OT environments. In a past life, I was a global IT director for a chemicals manufacturer, and IT, OT separation and security and obsolescence management was quite literally life and death, right? You had to be excellent at it, right, to keep bad things from happening at plants. Other organizations, maybe it's not, it's on the far other end of the spectrum, right? So maybe not so mature, very fragmented, and decisions are very local. But as you were just mentioning, right, that doesn't scale very well, and it becomes a hidden cost, and it impacts ROI, and it impacts the financials of the company. And where we find ourselves right now is in the middle of, again, kind of converging three entities into one, and really trying to leverage our best practices from each region and coming up with global best practices in these areas. And so, as you mentioned, right, the degree to which we can, one, kind of identify common problems at different locations, and establish architectural standards, architectural building blocks, both in IT and OT, making sure that we take every advantage to drive consistency in equipment and configuration and how we harvest data, how we analyze data, that goes, to a future state of a high degree of efficiency in operations, right? And a true high performing digital manufacturer, right? That's our goal, right? We want to be a high performance digital manufacturer in the fiber optics and cabling product space. And we've got a lot of really great stuff that we're doing in that direction. But we have a long way to go. And it takes just making sure that you drive that consistency of alignment between not only IT OT, but also different locations and different regions. And sometimes it's, you hear that, right, and you say, wow, it sounds like and we run into this, and I'm sure a lot of other people do too. Sounds like a heavy corporate, driven thing out to the plants, and you get some resistance. Like, well, it yes and no, right? And so what we want to do is be standardized to the extent that makes sense, but also be adaptable to what's truly required to be unique at a particular location, right? So that requires listening. It requires participation and a healthy dialogue back and forth between each locality, each region, the leadership levels, and then of course across IT and OT disciplines. And so there's a lot of groundwork to lay in terms of establishing the common vision, setting common goals, achieving outcomes together, that partnership, and again, reinforcing why each area should want to help along this journey. And I think when you bring that message, what we've found is the people closest to the work are kind of like, hallelujah, we've been waiting for this.
Yeah.
This makes total sense, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes, you get folks in layers of middle management, wherever they may be, sometimes looking through the wrong end of the telescope and kind of over focused on, the short-term costs as opposed to the long-term efficiency and effectiveness of the organization. And you have to have conversations with those folks too, because they might control the purse strings at a particular location. You got to get them on board, and there has to also be sponsorship, from corporate leadership to say, right, we may need to up our investment levels in some areas in the short term for some long-term gain. We need to take a longer-term perspective, and that can be hard to do in an environment where you're under a lot of cost pressure. Or maybe orders and bookings aren't to target, right? So, but that shouldn't knock you off your path, right? If you're really going to mature and be competitive, because guaranteed your competition is having the same conversations in their organization. You need to be about this, right? You need to be on this path.
Sure. Yeah, Blaine, I think what you're really talking about here is on the leadership side of both operations and the CIO side, and being able to listen to what they hold to be true and what they value at the end of the day, and recognizing that it's not two organizations butting heads, but two organizations working together for the same common output, which is they want the success for their team, they want the success for their company, and they need to collaborate on how they need to drive to those mutual goals there. Well, team, hey, we've covered a lot today, but if you're listening and you want something that you can take back to your plant or to your leadership team, I wrote an article that breaks this all down and what IT cares about, what operations needs, and how to meet in the middle. And I collaborated with Blaine on a good portion of that. So we'll put the link below in the comments for you to read and share with your CIO or your head of operations or your plant managers. Blaine, thank you so much for joining today. I really enjoyed our conversation, and thank you so much for watching. we'll see you all next week. And we have another episode of Wrench Factor coming out. And I hope you all have a wonderful Christmas and a good end of the year push.
Thank you, Tyler. It was an honor and pleasure to be with you and your audience. So thank you for having me. It's a great opportunity.
Thank you all.